So why would I advise against cohabitation before marriage? The simple answer to that question is there's plenty of evidence that it's a bad idea. And I just mean factual evidence to begin with, although I think there are other reasons. People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. And that's a really interesting fact because it flies in the face of what you might think of as a kind of pragmatic common sense. Because you might think, well, you don't buy a car without taking it out for a test drive. Woman's not a car, and neither is a man, and really, seriously, really not an object. And so it isn't obvious at all that metaphor applies, even though it's, at first shallow glance, it seems obviously true. But if it's obviously true, then you might say, why are people who live together before they get married more likely to get divorced? And one possible answer to that is people who are more likely to get divorced are the same people who are more likely to live together rather than to get married, and that's possible. It's very difficult to separate those two things out, but in some sense it doesn't matter. What the facts reveal is that if the goal is to learn what you need to learn so that you can decide who you should marry more effectively, or learn how to act if you do get married more effectively, and the goal is that your marriage will be better and last, then it doesn't work. And that's a strange truth. And then you might ask yourself, why doesn't it work? It's also the case, by the way, that the more sexual partners, the larger the number of sexual partners that someone has had before they get married, the more likely they are to get divorced as well. And it's also the case, by the way, and this is also interesting. So I spent a lot of time studying criminal behavior in all sorts of different manifestations, some of it on the political front with regard to the behavior of people who committed terrible atrocities in the service of political belief, some of it on the frontier of criminal sadism itself. I spent a lot of time studying the behavior of serial killers and mass torturers and people like that. But I also spent a lot of time as a research scientist looking at what psychiatrists and psychologists know as antisocial behavior. And antisocial behavior is the pattern of behavior that characterizes criminals. And it usually makes itself manifest pretty early in life, perhaps as early as 2 years old, by the way. And once it's established, it's extremely stable. It isn't obvious at all that psychologists or psychiatrists have learned anything about how to remediate antisocial behavior, so criminal behavior, or its precursors in childhood. Once it's there, and that especially seems to be the case after about 4 years of age, once it's there, it's unbelievably stable and resilient to and resistant to change. And it has a lot of different aspects, antisocial behavior. But one of the markers for antisocial behavior, delinquency, childhood conduct disorder, early onset criminality, is early sexual behavior and multiple partners. And so, you can take that for what it's worth. Why is that the case? You could speculate. Someone who's oriented in a criminal direction is more likely to take advantage of someone else for their own gratification. I think that's the basic commonality. I don't know that for sure, because we don't know why these different symptoms of criminality, let's say, link together, apart from the fact that criminals are predators and the really pathological criminals are predatory parasites, and that's really what defines a psychopath, by the way, is a psychopath is a predatory parasite. The archetypal psychopath is a sadistic predatory parasite. So the sadist takes delight in the pain of others, so positive pleasure in the pain of others. The predator uses others to their own advantage, and the parasite takes no responsibility for his or her own existence and manipulates or compels others to serve that goal. And so that's an ugly combination of traits, and one of the core elements of that is early multiple partner promiscuity. And so that's interesting, and that also might explain why more pre-marriage sexual partners increases the probability of divorce, is that it's a marker for the pattern of behavior that is characterized by the exploitation of others and is therefore more likely to be unsustainable over the medium to long run. So that's interesting. Then you could think about it. I thought about this, or philosophically, I thought about what are you telling someone when you live with them? Okay, so I've talked to lots of people, women who are cohabiting with men are generally not very happy about the fact that the relationship is not moving towards marriage. Now, I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Women seem to suffer more emotionally as a consequence of sexual activity outside of a committed relationship. You can imagine why that is. Women experience more negative emotion than men on average in general, but also women pay a much higher, sex is much riskier for women than it is for men, obviously. Hopefully I don't have to explain why that is. So women are often women who are cohabiting are often less than happy about that. And the men who I've talked to about that about their partner's displeasure with the current unstable nature of the relationship, often say something like, we don't need a piece of paper to indicate our commitment to each other, which sounds all revolutionary and Che Guevara, but which is really a pretty pathetic bit of reasoning.